one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but today we are continuing with our hodgepodge of choices here with some films, and I believe it's Tammy who brought this one to the table. So, Tammy, why don't you tell us what kind of film you subjected us to this week?
Arachnophobia.
Okay. And it was filmed in 1990. It was directed by Frank Mrshall and written by writers Don Jacoby, Al Williams, and Wesley Strick, among others. And it stars Jeff Daniels, the not too recently deceased Julian Sands, and John Goodman, among all others. Mm-hmm. So not too shabby since we just covered 10 Cloverfield. But in any case, let me read.
To mention, this past weekend I went to a big event, the Big Lebowski, where I got to see Goodman and the Big Lebowski. So this is my third Goodman movie in 2 weeks.
The triple threat. But in any case, a new species of South American killer spider hitches a lift to a California town in a coffin and starts to breed, leaving a trail of deaths that puzzle and terrify young Dr. Ross Jennings, who was newly arrived in town with his family. So, Tammy, if you could bring us around to first impressions.
Okay. You want me to go first, or?
If you like, you want to start out with your own, or start out with others.
Well, I don't actually remember the first time I watched it or how I got introduced to it, but I'm sure it was either my dad or somebody, because everybody knows I don't like spiders. So I'm sure that's how I'm sure it came about somehow, some way. But, and it's very weird. Yes, I don't like spiders, but I have quite a nice little collection of spider movies. But no, my first impression of it is I thought it was really good. I mean, come on, Goodman, with Goodman in it, you got that humor too, and there was definitely scenes that made my skin crawl, and because I'm not a spider fan, but yeah, I really liked it. I thought that it had the right amount of the humor and the drama and I don't know if you really want to call it horror because it's spiders, but I guess it is somewhat of a horror.
Oh, for some people, it definitely makes horror.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, like I said, I don't like spiders, and if I watch a spider movie and I actually go up by it, then I liked it for some reason. So, because I do like the spider movies, But this one, yeah, I would say out of all the spider movies I have, it's probably my favorite. So. And let's go on to Jake.
Okay. So, well, I've seen this movie many years ago. Couldn't even tell you when I saw it. And I only have the vaguest recollections. Like, I remembered a few parts. I specifically remember the desiccated body arriving in the coffin from South America. And
Yeah,
this
it's kind of hard to forget that scene.
right. And it's entirely possible this movie is. I've never been arachnophobic, but I've always had what I considered a healthy distrust of spiders. But it grew significantly. When I saw this, I think it was probably a year or two later after I saw this that I was given an opportunity and eagerly handled a domesticated tarantula. Um, but other than that, I've always been a little nervous about handling spiders. And lately, I've actually trained myself to love spiders. It can be done. It definitely can be done. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so adamant about trying to encourage people to overcome arachnophobia or ophidiophobia, which is the fear of snakes. It can be done. And I'm working on, like, again, I wasn't phobic on spiders, but now I enjoy handling them. I still would not go out of my way with many species. I still have a healthy distrust of some.
Well,
But
I don't want to handle any of your normal spiders. I have handled more than one tarantula, and I was fine. If you've handled one like you said, the feeling of a tarantula on you feels a lot different than a normal spider because they almost kind of like pinch as they walk on you compared to like a regular spider is like ugh, when it touches you the feeling is completely different. I don't know how else to explain it because I held a pig toad and I held a regular tarantula, which he was a pretty good sized one. Well, I thought he was pretty good sized because my hands are very small, so
right.
But um, but your regular like household spiders, nope. I still do not. Nope. It's like David. He teases me because I'll sit there and go spider, 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 spider till somebody comes and gets it.
Right.
I don't want to. I don't want to touch any one of those. I don't want to be near any one of those. But if you brought a tarantula over, I'll be like, "Oh, here, put it in my hand."
I'm glad when I'm not around because then when there are spiders, you're forced to kill them yourself.
Well, see, I try very hard not to do that. And actually, it's kind of funny. At work, I've developed a reputation as the spider guy. Like, if they see a spider, I'm the one who's supposed to catch it and take it outside. And just like in my previous job, I was the snake guy. And but it's fine with me. But and at one point, our Dr. Atherton, I believe it is, does make a good point about how important spiders are to the environment. I read a statistic once of how many you'll find in a healthy ecosystem, and it's enough to freak out true arachnophobics. That's for sure. But at any rate, so I had vague memories of this. I always remember John Goodman in the movie. I think it was one of the first movies I saw him in, actually. But I had very vague recollections. I wasn't familiar with Jeff Daniels at the time, so I forgot, frankly, that he starred in it. I've been meaning to watch this again over the years. Many times I've kind of thought maybe I'll watch it again. And I kept going back and forth on trying to get a copy. And I thought I had a copy and I couldn't find one. So maybe I do have one buried somewhere, but I ended up having to wait for Dave for you to post it because I couldn't find a copy. But I finally got to see it again. And it's It's a fun little movie. The scientist in me had some alarm bells, and I'll have to mention those as we go. There were certain things that I had issue with, but other than that, it's a reasonably entertaining movie. And there was that one quote that made me crack up, and I mentioned it in the chat, and I'll mention it when we get around to it. But there were a few pretty good lines. But overall, it's an enjoyable movie. I'm glad I had an opportunity to see it again. And when I finally do get around to getting a copy, I guess I'll have to watch it again. So.
You're muted.
Yeah, because I'm done.
No, I'm talking about Tammy.
Oh, okay.
I heard her talking in the background, and she's entirely muted.
That would explain why I didn't hear anything.
I was saying, part of the reason I picked it for the Hodgepodge month was because we just got out of October, so I thought it was still kind of fit. So, all right, David.
Yep, seems appropriate.
Alrighty, I'm not exactly sure when I first saw this movie. I think I only actually saw it once, even though I own the frickin' movie. And I think I might have seen it twice because you wanted to watch it before, but it was a long time ago. It was at least maybe 14 years ago since I've seen the movie. It's not that I didn't want to watch it. I've just had so many movies that I've been watching. It's hard to get back to some of those ones that you kind of want to rewatch from time to time. So I'm glad that we got the opportunity to bring it to the show to discuss it and whatnot. I do recognize Julian Sands from it, and I know that he went up into some mountains, and his body was found later, which is sad. But I remember Julian Sands for quite a few movies. Some of the Warlock movies, Rose Red.
I was going to say, I know we recently did something he was in. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it was about a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Not to mention, it's interesting that two co-stars of this one, other than him, Goodman and Daniels, starred in the two movies I put forward in February. You know, we had the one bowling movie with John Goodman and the other one with Jeff Daniels.
So, I like this one because it works a lot with camera angles and that kind of thing. So you definitely have the creep factor in there. You got the webs. You got this the interesting town folk, the small town. Shall I say mentality? So to me, when it comes to small towns, a lot of them act like they're Hicks. No offense.
With the camera, like you said, the spider, the new breed of spider is what I guess what you want to call it, are kind of like creepy, really creepy and ugly looking. But when they're descending down with their web and the way the camera catching that happens more than once in the movie, and it's kind of like, oh, that looks kind of cool, even though the spider looks really creepy, but that looks kind of cool.
Right.
And I guess in this particular one, that's who they put as a sheriff. You know, he did not seem to be on the right side of the law. Really, I mean, he had some five-finger discounts while he was going through some of those victims' houses. So, I guess I couldn't
Just
get behind him for
randomly
all that much.
snacking.
Yep.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
other than that, the film had some interesting moments with some, and I give it credit for having practical effects, and I imagine how they actually built that spider to be. I know it was a mechanical spider, the the bigger one, but
Well, one of them at least, yeah.
yeah, they at least used some kind of a mechanical spider because that thing was, yeah. But in any
Well,
case,
apparently they had a real spider they called Big Bob, but they also had a mechanical spider to stand in for it at times. Yeah.
Speaking
but
of the sheriff, the first time I watched it,
Mhm.
he was so annoying when he was sticking his hand in that box of cereal. I kept hoping he was gonna get. I
Well,
wanted him to get bit.
supposedly he did, but they cut the scene. Yeah, it's too bad.
Oh, they changed the scene.
Well,
Okay.
no. Apparently, at the end, he finds. Well, spoilers, folks. When he finds the doctor in the barn, he drives away, and supposedly he got bit while driving and crashed, but they took that out of the movie.
Oh, I thought he was gonna get it when he stuck his hand in that cereal and was munching on the cereal. But
Right.
all he ends up doing is pouring out a dead one. You know, it's
The,
like, oh man.
the movie does do a good job with the bait and switches and jump scares, I'll admit.
Yes. Anything else,
yes,
David?
yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. It definitely had some interesting ways of showing what a phobia is for one specific subject,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it definitely it gave some chills at the time that I first watched it. So I'm done.
All righty.
Okay. Okay. So, well, I guess we started out as the Julian Sands character. He's a what is he? A professor?
Yeah, he's an entomologist.
Yeah. So we see him. He's all in the Amazon, I believe, or something.
More or less, they're in southern Venezuela. He specifically talks about the tepuis, which are really, uh, they're almost vertical sided, flat top mountains surrounded by cloud forest. So they're like rainforest, but not rainforest. And yeah, he's right. There's a lot of really cool, weird stuff that's
And
only.
I wonder if that Aborigine guy might have been in Crocodile Dundee along with that other dude who seemed to be with him, because that other guy that was with him, Julian Sands,
The
he
other
was in
guy.
Crocodile Dundee.
All I know is where they are though is beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, the scenery is just something else, and
yeah.
and I have to. I know it's a movie, but you have to somewhat believe in what he's saying as to where they were going. That
Mhm.
there could actually be undiscovered species of of insects and spiders and everything because of where they were going. That could actually be true. You know.
Oh, it is absolutely true. They're
So,
still finding new stuff all the time there. Yeah.
and I can see why because of how it is, there. But it is beautiful.
Right.
So, but we see him with his team and everything, and it's quite a unique way of how he collected these specimens that they put
Mhm.
all of these catching things out, and then he sprayed whatever, and all of a sudden, everything's just dropping, ding, 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 ding,
They
ding, ding.
basically use fumigation, which that made me cringe a little, but I realized that's probably not inaccurate. I think that is and one of them mentioned electrofishing, which I've actually witnessed electrofishing. Scientists do have ways of sampling areas that unfortunately, uh, I think Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park said something about uh, he described science as like a violent, penetrative act. And he says something like, what you call science, I call the rape of the natural world. And I'm a scientist, but I will admit they sometimes use methods I'd rather. And was seeing that, I was like, I had to cringe. You see all these butterflies dropping dead and all the spiders and everything, and it was like, yeah.
Yep, but it's amazing how they kind of knew when the spiders dropped. There was a little bit more of a thunk,
Oh wait,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
to make
The
it.
butterflies kind of floated down for the most part. Yeah.
But we see them doing this, and they come across the spider that he believes is a new species. And while this is happening, you see you get a glimpse of a much bigger spider
Mm-hmm.
kind of watching what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And um, the photographer, you can tell he is definitely not a spider fan.
You get the
And
impression he's not entirely a nature fan. It was like
yeah,
at one point when they're getting there, he's talking to the professor, and he asked him his specialty. He's like, "Oh, I'm an entomologist or whatever," and he's like, "What's your specialty?" Football. And I'm like, "Dude, you're in the wrong place."
most definitely. And so they're collecting everything, and they believe that the spiders that they have collected are that they're dead. And while he's taking a photograph, the photographer taking a photograph of one, it is not dead. It jumps on his camera, and he goes bonkers. And then once he steps on it, the professor is not very happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, they collect everything and they go back to the camp. And the photographer guy is not feeling very well. But nobody realized when they collected everything that the spider that was watching them decided to hitch a ride back to the camp too.
Mm-hmm.
And the photographer guy goes to lay down because he's just not doing well. And well, he gets visited by the spider that was watching everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that,
Yep.
but they don't realize at first that that is what killed him.
Well, his fever went away.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, but
So
I
then
mean,
when they
it
pack
didn't
him
go
up
away.
and
It killed him, according to them.
well, that's what they thought at first. Yeah.
well, they pack him up and think he's sealed, and
Mm-hmm.
this spider that's
Mm-hmm.
been watching everything and that
Mm-hmm.
decided it was going to hitch a ride back to good old USA with the dude.
Yeah.
What do
So,
y'all think of the way they did that coffin? I thought that was kind of cool. You know, the little run the poles through it so they could carry it. I was like,
it was interesting.
kind of interesting. But
Yep, and the hole was just big enough for
just big
our.
enough. Yep.
Yep. So it feasted on its way to America.
It did indeed. Mm-hmm.
So yes, we get him to America, and the coroner opens the box, and he's on the phone telling whoever, I don't think we're having an open casket.
Right.
Yeah,
That
him and his wife are a little bit interesting because they nonstop eat.
I was going to say he's a bit of a trip. It's like later we have the scene where the professor's assistant Collins is there to see the autopsy, and the coroner just comes walking through, like he's sick. He cannot stomach what he's dealing with, and the coroner just comes walking through, eating a snack, just having a good time. It's like,
Yeah, he seems to always have like a sandwich or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
But and I'll admit, I'd be a little wigged out about that too. I'm like, dude, are you really sure you want to be eating in this room? But yeah,
But yeah, while he's on the spider that hitched a ride decides to, okay, my ride is over, and I think it's funny. The spider confronts the dog, and the dog is like, ah, no way, shoot, gone. Confronts the cat, and the cat's like, me too. And then you see the dog come flying out of the what is that? The door flap.
Yeah.
And then the cat's next. And then here goes the spider, but then he gets another ride with the bird. But that doesn't last real long.
Right.
So now we finally come to the new doctor in town, just arriving at his house. So, nobody realized, the son finds the dead bird, but doesn't see the big old spider. But what you think he sees it because all of a sudden he's in the house and saying that there's a spider that needs to be taken care of. And good old dad goes, well, let's go check out that spider and have your mom take care of it.
Yeah, it's kind of amusing the little thing they play here, because not only is the father arachnophobic, we get the impression that the son's not a fan either, but both the wife and the daughter are like, ooh, spider, cool.
Right.
It's like, yeah.
So, anybody have anything to say about our nice big spider and how we got to America yet? Or
well, there is one thing that they set up very early on, and it becomes a problem very quickly, not long after the point you paused at. And that is that Dr. Atherton points out that this spider has some very unusual morphology. He points out that it does not appear capable of reproduction. And he comes up with this theory of it being like a sort of a worker drone for a colony, much like a bees or wasps, which is an interesting concept, but totally unknown in the world of arachnids. There are spiders that live in communities, but none that have a social hierarchy. But this becomes a problem soon, because the first night Well, there's this cute little thing where the wife says something like, "You shouldn't kill a spider right after moving in; it's bad luck." And then later, the Dr. Ross is trying to uh, have a mating session with his wife, and he's like, we shouldn't not do this. It's bad luck, or I don't remember the exact wording. And she just kind of like, touche, sort of like touche, sort of thing. But then we cut to a scene of two spiders getting it on.
Well, the thing is, the spider that the professor was talking about,
right? And that's
not,
where the movie has a pretty major gap in its internal logic, as far as I could tell. I don't know if you guys saw a workaround, but if this species lacks sexual organs, how is it going to reproduce? But
I don't think that's the spider.
Well, if you go back to Jurassic Park, some West African frogs.
Well, no, that's completely different. There we're talking about they were supposedly all the same sex, and that DNA allowed for spontaneous sexual changes. Here, the doctor straight up says they lack sexual organs.
The spider that he said that about was the ones they collected. The one that hitched a ride, I don't think was the same one as what they collected.
Well, it wasn't the same one. It clearly wasn't the same one. But they made such a big deal about it that to me it felt like a break in the internal logic of the film.
I don't think so because of the fact that that spider that they found in the barn mated with the big spider, and whatever came out of that nutsack looking spider egg thing, is what kind of species they were looking at.
And, but there had to be that initial.
And if you think about it that way, especially after what they said it was, right after they said that, they said that they were soldier spiders, which means that they don't really need a sex, only the queen really needs to have sex.
Right. So it like I said, it maybe it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. Like, in my feeling, like I think they could have been clearer about it. The other thing is that for me, as a science geek and whatever, they goofed, or there was some a gap in the internal. Well, there was a gap in the presentation. It's like
in the techno jargon.
No. The visual presentation, like it's like when you see a movie where they are talking about venomous snakes, and they show garter snakes, king snakes, and pythons. I'm like, okay, well, or like take for example Bullet Train, where a boom slang is a major part of the plot, but the snake that was a stand-in for the boom slang looks nothing like a boom slang. And here we had they called it a common house spider that might have been the other parent. I'm not sure. I didn't get a good look at the other parent, but Big Bob is a Goliath bird-eating spider, which is a tarantula, which is a mygalomorph. And all the little hybrid spiders were huntsman spiders, which are araneid spiders. Not only are they not closely related, they are a completely different group of spiders that some people would even tell you mygalomorphs are not actually spiders. They're so different that they might as well be a whole different group. Kind of like the people that insist that king snakes and copperheads can mate. It's like, no, they're not even related. They're not even close. And so for me as a scientist, I'm looking, I'm like, they couldn't have found like little trapdoor spiders or something to be the hybrids, really? But I know that would be the general audience wouldn't even notice. But for me, I'm like,
well, yeah, I had no idea what the different. I had no idea what the different species were or whatever. It was just like,
right.
okay, that's a big
If
spider,
you're,
and that's
if you're not too much of a nerd and can sit back and watch a movie and not care what the species are and still believe it,
gee, thanks.
that's what and that's what most of the general audience will probably be like. They don't care what species it is. All they care about is whether they enjoy it. Maybe that's not the modern day audience in this day and age.
Well, yeah. All I realized was big spider. That was a normal spider. They made it, and now they came up with this ugly looking thing. Okay.
Right. Well, see, okay. Well, to put it in more somewhat closer terms, it would be like, let's say, this is probably not a bad comparison, actually. This would be like, let's say, a wolf and a chimpanzee made it. That's like, your average person's probably going to have trouble buying that. You know what I mean?
The only way that they could mate them is in a test tube.
Exactly. It's the same basic principle. Just like I said, spiders, most people wouldn't notice, but but anyway, it does make for those little spiders they use, the little huntsman spiders do look pretty kind of like, ooh, that's not one I'd want to mess with.
Oh no, it's not exactly your daddy long legs that that dude was talking about that scared his ass.
Of course, that's another thing that bugs me about the set. That as a scientist, apparently they imported those spiders, and they had to go through a lot of hoops to do it. And then, due to quarantine restrictions, they couldn't send them back. They had to keep them. So it's like, what did they do with all those spiders afterwards? Because they didn't want to kill them either. They tried really hard not to hurt them. So it's like, what did they give them or sell them to local pet stores? I'm not sure.
Ew.
Yeah.
I don't want one of those.
Maybe they ended up in eight-legged freaks. And,
it could be. Yeah, maybe they actually kept them in Hollywood to use in other movies. Maybe. I don't know.
I guess I didn't realize that a lot of those spiders were actually real.
A lot of them were, yeah. Apparently, all those little huntsman spiders, I read that according to IMDb, the first batch was about 300, and then they had to get more.
What?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So all those spiders crawling towards the children were real?
Most of them, yeah. Doesn't that give you a different feeling?
Are those huntsman spiders actually poisonous?
No, they can bite because they're big enough, but they're considered non-venomous, non-toxic.
Okay, so the spiders that they were saying that were attacking everybody and killing everybody were actually, in reality, harmless. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Although huntsman spiders, and I wonder if it's the same species, there's a difference. I think it's a different species that's considered very well established in the U.S. that is an invasive exotic. So it's not harmless. It's harmless to humans. But, yeah. But they're...
Interesting.
Yeah. It's good times. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, we're to the point where the wifey takes this spider out to the barn, and
Yeah.
yes, the big spider, the little spider get it on, and the
So,
next day,
unbeknownst to her, but knownst to us, she is the matchmaker.
yes, and then she is evidently a photographer,
Yes.
and she is the one that notices the webbing and everything next day or so,
It
and
does.
takes all the pictures.
Hey,
Hello.
good
All
to
right.
finally be on.
Yeah.
So,
Hello,
So,
Dustin. We
hey,
just got done doing the intro, so you can
yeah,
let
I'll
us
uh,
know
just I'll just give mine real quick, I guess. So I had
Yep.
heard of Arachnophobia for quite a while before I actually saw it. I first saw this in high school. Like this was kind of a big enough movie that it had full page ads in like comic books, so I had heard of it like that way, but I had just never watched it. And one of my high school teachers in biology, she did a really interesting thing where she played like a couple of movies and then explained the more interesting like scenes that had some actual like biological weight to them.
Huh.
And so this one, I don't remember a lot of the lesson, which makes me sad because it was really well done. But what this scene in particular that we're on right now was something that stood out where she was talking about like hybridization and like unexpected compatibility with like invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think isn't this how killer bees came into being? Like this is how bees became Africanized, that they hybridized with invasive bees, and that's what resulted in that really aggressive strain. Like, isn't that kind of the same deal?
Essentially, I want to say, wasn't it the result of actual breeding programs? I feel like it might have been, but
It could have been, but it's been a very, very long time since
right.
I've like looked into it. And the way it was always presented, it was just sort of an accident.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I mean, I ended up really enjoying this movie. Like the spider stuff is very creepy, and normally I'm not all that afraid of spiders. But a lot of the stuff in here is meant to kind of give you like the very worst of it. Like if you weren't afraid of spiders, it is trying very hard to push that on you. And if you are actually arachnophobic, I feel like this would be a really hard movie to handle, especially if all of the, oh, look, they could just come out of the shower, or, oh, they're in your sheets, or a lot of it is really harsh on the disinclined. But it's, I don't know, this is something, I think I actually saw this earlier this year for something of some kind. I might have just watched this independently earlier this year, so I remembered it pretty well. I rewatched it today, for sake of discussion. But I felt like I didn't have to pay a whole lot of attention because a lot of it just sticks out so well. And so we are about to where the mayhem starts to really get going. I mean, we met Julian Sands' professor.
Right.
Like poor Julian Sands.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I like
well, you were talking about how this thing may have had a negative effect in some ways, and one of the scenes we've already gone by, of course, is where the guy arrives from South America, shriveled like a prune, and that I did see this movie when I was young, and that scene left an impression on me. I was like, ooh, you know. But
well, we know that the guy was just drained by the spider.
yeah,
But the coroner doesn't.
right.
So I'm not so sure how
but
much
the dog
water
and the
his.
cat realized it. The dog and the cat realized that it arrived.
Yeah, it runs into some animals pretty quickly. Like it gets carried to the farm by that bird.
Mhm. Yeah. And that bird messed with the wrong critter.
Well, if it had been a little bit more aggressive as a predator, I mean, maybe the spider would have been wounded before it could really sneak off and reproduce like that.
Right.
So you could say the bird fumbled the ball here.
You could.
Although it was kind of a big spider, so maybe it couldn't handle it right away.
Yeah. Just think if that bird had been better at its job.
Right?
So I think there was I'm trying to remember some more of the biology stuff. There was a lot of talk about like web structure, how I think they used kind of a hybrid web design because each spider has its own web design.
Right.
And it seemed like there was like a little bit of like funnel spider and orb spider in there. How familiar are you with that, Jake? Invertebrates are not necessarily my thing, but you might have
You missed. We had a pretty lengthy discussion about that, actually. I was talking about how the main spider, Big Bob, was a Goliath bird-eating spider, and the little spiders were some kind of small huntsman spider. And I was talking about how they're not even related to one another. Huntsmans are Araneid spiders related to crab spiders, and bird-eating spiders are tarantulas, which are mygalomorphs. And to put it in your parlance, that would be like saying that, almost saying that a snake would mate with a chameleon. I mean, that's the sort of difference we're talking.
They are in the same order.
They're close, but they're not
compatible.
Yeah. But the other thing, just you brought up an interesting point I didn't get into, which is tarantulas don't really make webs. They tend to live under stuff where they might have, they'll have webbing laid out to use as extensions of their nervous system so that they can feel vibrations, but they don't really make webs. And huntsman spiders are hunters. They don't really make webs either. So it's interesting that the spiders that make these really big, elaborate webs, their stand-ins were spiders that wouldn't actually even make webs. So that's kind of interesting.
That's great.
Well, I know what you're saying. When a long time ago, when an ex-boyfriend of mine, he had a little pink-toed tarantula, and yeah, she didn't really make. She liked to be. There was like a log, a hollowed log that he had in there,
right?
And that's where she liked to go. She liked to curl up in there, and there really wasn't much webbing in there at all, in her terrarium or whatever you want to call it, you know. She liked to be in there. The thing that was kind of neat though is they shed their skin.
They molt, yeah.
They molt. And I remember we came home one day and she had done that, and it looked like there was two of them in there.
Right.
It was like really neat. I was like, wow, it looks like there's two of them.
Right.
If there's an adaptation where that can be used like as a decoy.
Probably. And actually, I've personally encountered, there's a caterpillar, I think they call it the 3-spot Harris moth, that I found one at work one day. And they actually hold on to part of their skin. It like sticks to their butt. And they like hold on to part of their previous skin so the predators will bite on that and miss the body. And they're probably not the only creature that does that. I don't know if any spiders do that, but it would make sense if that is something that tarantulas or some spiders do, is to keep that around as a decoy. That's possible.
It
But,
just looks so realistic. I really thought,
right.
Well, it is real. Yeah, it's the spider's exoskeleton.
Right.
well, I was told a long time ago that tarantulas themselves actually don't have a backbone, and if you drop them, if they drop
Yeah.
or fall from not even that big of a height, it could kill them.
Yeah.
The skin is the skeleton. That's what the exo part means.
And that's something that they point out on the IMDb page that about that opening scene where they were fumigating all the creatures. They said that if a spider, especially a tarantula or a large, heavy spider, fell from the height that those spiders apparently were falling from, they would not have landed intact. They would have broken into pieces from the impact. So it definitely wouldn't have survived.
Because I remember Bob telling me that when I was holding the little pink toad, and
Yeah.
he make sure you don't drop her because if you do, it'll probably kill her. And
Right.
I'm trying to hold on to her, and this little sucker's going, and I'm like, whoa, dude. I
Like-
don't want to.
Araneid spiders, like huntsman's or jumping spiders or whatever, don't weigh as much, so they can fall further. But yeah, I've heard the same thing about tarantulas, that they are physically too heavy to handle large impacts, yeah, it's the way they're built. They're not built for that sort of rock.
For most invertebrates, they avoid that because they're so small and they're so lightweight that the
Right.
fall really affect them very much. But these are completely different.
Right. Yep. But that's the magic of movies, right?
Right. Well, also, what I like about like the spider mating scene is that it's somewhat accurate to actual like spider mating. I mean, there is more. A lot of them have like elaborate things they do. Like one of my professors in grad school, his main thing was like invertebrate, like arachnid behavior. Like he had a lot of stuff that he was doing. Like they were like dissecting spider brains with like this really crazy looking microscope, and they were exploring like behavior with that. And so I'm sure. Well, we talked about like spider like mating dances and stuff
Right.
a few times in class, and I really wish I could kind of pick his brain for more info on this. Like that could be a fun podcast episode.
Yeah.
Just like have him come on and like, hey, what do you think about, like, we could pick like 2 or 3 movies like this, Eight-Legged Freaks, and something else like spidery, and just kind of see what he thinks. Like that could be a really fun time.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. I like about that spider mating scene is how they cut from the humans mating to the spiders mating. I just found that very amusing.
Yeah, that was cute.
Quite a sense of humor to it, didn't it?
Right.
So I guess we should kind of like move along now.
Right.
So
Well, it's just like handing a packet off, really.
Right.
So
And a lot of
we were to the point where she took all the pictures and everything, and the new doc goes into town and realizes that he's not going to be the new doc after all.
Yeah.
Because the old doctor's crazy, yeah.
And he's an asshole. And he's played by Henry Jones, who's a veteran actor who's been in so many things over the years. I think this was probably one of his later movies, like, if not last. But yeah, I mean, that is an asshole thing to do. This guy that you've told, hey, yeah, I'm getting ready to retire. A position's opening up, come talk to me. I'll get you settled in. You wait till he has moved there and then go, oh, by the way, I'm not retiring. I mean, that was an asshole thing to do.
Oh, yes. But it was great that he ended up meeting up with, I forgot her name.
The old school teacher. I want to call her Joyce for some reason, but then again, that is my grandma's name, so maybe that's why that's sticking out in my mind.
It's
But it was great that she met up with her because she put the sheriff in line too about writing a ticket. And
Margaret Hollins.
He's a real piece of work too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get the feeling everybody in this small town is just kind of like that. So they do a good job of like establishing this place just through I want to say local color, like through the characters.
They are definitely colorful. We already talked about the medical examiner. He was a interesting fella, but yeah.
Yeah, I like how they have him like just not rattled by anything. It's like, oh, we might want to have this closed casket. He's like eating a sandwich or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, he talked about he's always got food and like he just keeps on keeping on.
With the uncle from Cobra. He's always eating candy in every scene.
Right. And of course the woman, Margaret Hollins, she tells Jennings, well, I'll be your patient, basically. She says straight up, what'd she say about the doctor that he just stopped using leeches not long ago? Like,
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, just clearly doesn't have much faith in him as a doctor. And she's like, and when he came here, people didn't think much of him until he threw a big party, and then everyone loved him after that. And she's like, so I'm going to throw you a party. And so she really is very cool to Dr. Ross. And
yeah, she's a tough old bird.
She is a tough old bird who unfortunately isn't there for long, but she does throw him that party, which is where we have that great moment where I believe it was the doctor's wife, Molly Jennings, was talking to the Beechwood family, and one of them teaches, or one of them coaches football, and one of them is like a member of the team. And the daughter, I think it was a cheerleader. So they're all related in the football. And the wife is just like, nepotism, huh? And then the other wife, without a trace of irony, is like, actually, we're Baptists. I just thought that was hilarious. I had to crack. And you get the impression the Beechwoods are not the coldest beers in the fridge, but they're.
Ooh, that's a new one.
What's that?
Coldest beers. That's a new one to me.
I picked that up years ago. I heard that in Salem, and I'm like, oh, that's so great. I love it. But it's the kind of aphorism you would think that family would use, actually.
Oh, no, it fits. I agree. So, a little new to me. So. I like it.
David, you got anything to say? I've heard from you in a while.
As far as what?
Anything so far?
Well, I know I love that, and I'm sure we'll get. I'll probably bring it up in my favorites later, but the couple that just go on eating. I think it was the coroner. I love it when that spider shows up in that popcorn bowl.
Right. Come to think of it, weren't they the ones who left Hollins's party carrying tons of food?
Yep, and she was like, "Did you want some doggy bags for that?"
No, we're good.
Yep. So yes, after the party, unfortunately, what was her name again?
Margaret.
Margaret, yes.
Yeah.
Margaret settles in for the night, and she ends up being the next victim of the spider. So,
Yeah.
She's the first victim in the town, isn't she? Yeah.
well, the first
Yes.
victim in the town, but yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't realize that is what has killed her. The original doctor is blaming Jennings and saying that because he took her off of blood pressure meds.
Which, as someone who is dealing with that myself, Dr. Jennings was absolutely right. He looked at her and he's like, the numbers he gave her were actually probably better than my numbers. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I think you know what you're talking about here. She's probably good to go off those. But then, yeah, she ends up dying, and the other doctor, without hesitation, oh, she had heart problems, so it's obviously a heart attack. Oh, well, she probably forgot her meds. Oh, I told her to stop taking them. Oh, so you killed her. That's like,
Well, yeah. And then, of course, he threatened to sue him for malpractice.
right. And meanwhile, Jennings is like, let's have an autopsy. And he's like, well, that might be how they do it in the big city, but that's not how we do it here.
That was
And
wild.
of course, Sheriff Lloyd, who was dumb as all hell, he was definitely kissing butt there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The sheriff is, he's not the best sheriff.
No, definitely not.
But then, I guess it's a little bit ironic about who ends up getting bit next. The original doctor.
Well, no, I think the football player was the next.
The football player gets it next. That's right, because that's where some of that photography comes in that David was talking about, with the spider coming down.
Basically, Coach Beechwood is like, I'll throw some business your way. Or he says something that sounds really callous, like, oh, she was your only patient, and now she's gone. But then he's like, well, come down to the school. I'll throw some business your way. So he lets Dr. Jennings check out the team before practice. And then the kid drops dead in the middle of practice. And that's when people start calling Dr. Ross Dr. Death, because
that was hilarious. Like the way how that's introduced, like the little kids, it's like, they're calling you Dr. Death. And it's like, what?
Right. Which I guess is understandable, but Yeah.
That just makes me think of like the old Simpsons joke. It's like, watch out for El Bardo, and they're handing out like a wanted poster of like somebody drew Bart as like a old gangster looking guy with like scars, and Bart's just like, cool. So they're calling you Dr. Death. Cool.
See,
we got interjected here too that while this is all going on, John Goodman shows up at the house because he's checking it for pests and termites and everything.
Right.
So that's when you get introduced to him.
Dr. Ross is all proud of his wine cellar. He can't wait to do the wine cellar. And this nail gun that he has, which is an impressive nail gun, is like blowing holes in the wood. But yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of a little bit funny. I mean, he had what was it, the Lincoln, whatever it was, a certain year. Even later on, he was like, when he was throwing bottles at the thing, definitely not throw this.
Which I thought that was kind of funny. Of course, there was a scene earlier there was a scene earlier when they were moving in that made me feel very, well, these people are privileged. It's something like where the guy he shows off a bottle of wine to one of the movers, and he's like, "This is a $27 bottle," and the guy's like, "Wow, that must be pretty tasty, huh?" And he's like, I almost don't want to drink it at that price. And I'm like, why the hell do you have it if you don't plan to ever drink it? It's like, that's just showing off for no reason, you know?
Collect it for a special occasion kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just the way he said it. It just sounded so, yeah.
When I was in grad school, I had a $20 bottle of a beer that I kept in the fridge for like 4 years, and I drank it when I graduated. So I feel like you could do something like that if you got a hold of something special.
And that does lead to an amusing moment later where the wife, Dr. Ross's wife, is talking, Molly is talking to Delbert, I think is Goodman's character. Delbert McClintock, yeah. Which sounds a lot like Delbert McClinton. That's kind of interesting to me. But she's talking about, oh, my husband's building a wine cellar. And he's like, oh, well, I collect beer bottles myself.
And he was canned. Like, it was even more lowbrow.
Right.
Well, yeah.
What was it? A Miller High Life from '72 or something?
With a misprinted label. There was only like 100 in circulation.
Right?
Well, somebody would probably want that, although I feel like people with like less of an imagination would want that. Let's put it that way. It's probably a cute thing to collect, at least.
That's like the kind of information that would show up in one of like those Uncle John bathroom readers or something like that, you know?
Goodman's character here reminds me of his character Dale from Raising Arizona, crossed with Bill Murray's character from Caddyshack and Stephen Root's character from Office Space. If you put them all in a blender, you got Delbert McClintock. It's kind of amusing. But actually, I could see him getting together with Murray's character and comparing notes on pest extermination.
Yeah, pair that with the pest inspectors from Mouse Hunt, and then you got a deal.
So, anyways, after the football kid, and they didn't realize of that one either that it was a spider.
Mm-hmm.
We now have the original doctor for the town and his wife all settling in to go to bed for the night, and he decides he's gonna get up for something and sticks his foot in his slipper, and guess what? There's something else in that slipper.
Yeah.
It bit me. It's just a spider.
Yeah, she says it's just a spider. He's like, as he's going into seizures and everything.
He's like, holy shit, wait a minute. And then he just immediately starts dying.
Right. Yeah, this spiders have some fast acting venom and a lot of it apparently. And I don't think we mentioned that. We haven't gotten that far, but later, when Dr. Atherton gets to look at it, he sees that it has I think it was 3 venom sacs, which is kind of weird. But
quite a lot, yeah.
But it definitely means they could inject more than actually it was earlier yesterday. I've mentioned I know I've told you guys, I think I've mentioned on the channel that I've become rather a fan of a YouTube channel, My Wild Backyard. This guy Spencer Hoffman goes around looking at all kinds of stuff, largely spiders, but snakes, insects, what have you. And I was watching a video he did. He's done several videos on the red widow spider in Florida. One of them actually bit him on camera, and that was an interesting experience. But he was talking about it, and he was talking very specifically that black widow spiders are much more toxic than rattlesnakes, but they inject a comparatively tiny amount of venom. So they don't mess you up as bad as rattlesnakes do because there just isn't enough there. And these spiders must be injecting, either they must be injecting a lot of venom, or they are probably dozens, if not hundreds of times more venomous than widow spiders with the effects that they have, or some combination. But it's pretty clear that this is some potent stuff that they have.
And that's when they finally do realize, though, that the spider bite. He sees the spider bite.
Even then, the coroner is like, I still don't know. I mean, it's clearly a spider bite, but there's no spiders around here that do that, which is correct, or was, would be correct. Like I was just saying, that's not something that usually happens with spiders. But Dr. Ross insists on exhuming the other bodies. Well, first of all, they get the toxicology report, and it comes back, yes, there is a toxin in the blood. So he manages to get the guy to sign off on exhuming the other two bodies. And he finally gets his autopsy, and that's when they're able to say, yeah,
we have a bit of a problem here.
Yeah. And they also contact Dr. Atherton, who sends his colleague, Chris Collins, to come check things out.
Yeah, I really love that whole set of interactions, because he's like, oh, I'll just send my TA, I'll just send my grad student to check this out. It's probably fine, and he gives all these explanations about why you're overreacting.
Right.
And the very first thing the grad student says, I think we got a very big problem here.
Right.
Well, you could tell that the professor was actually recognizing the name of the town that this was actually happening in, and that's why he sent his goon in first, and because he didn't want to deal with it right away, and he wanted him to get a specimen and all that jazz.
I'm not so sure he didn't want to deal with it. It's just he makes a valid point. He makes a very real point, which is people are afraid of spiders. They do tend to ascribe things to spiders that they shouldn't necessarily. I've read on medical sites that they feel that one of the most misdiagnosed things in the ER is brown recluse bites. People think they've been bitten by a brown recluse when something else is actually causing the damage. So an entomologist who does this for a living, who's considered the foremost expert, he probably does field dozens of calls every year from people who are just overreacting. So I think he had the perfectly normal reaction to it. And but yeah, he probably does send the guy because the name of the town is like, why do I know that? It doesn't, it's not until Dr. Ross tells him, well, we had someone come here dead that used to live here. That's when he realizes, oh, that's where the photographer was from. Yeah. But he does send someone to check it out. Yeah.
His apprentice wasn't doing so well over at the coroner's office, though.
Right. That was a funny scene.
And what about the bug exterminators driving? I mean, it wasn't exactly the best.
That was later.
Right.
We didn't get
Well,
that far yet.
wasn't this around the time that the Beachwoods called him to their place? I think.
No, first they're checking out the house. Because
Oh,
the coroner's still alive.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and doesn't the professor see
didn't die
the
till much
photograph? Doesn't he see the photograph of the cobweb web, and he's like, where is
that's much
That's
later.
near the end. That's near the end. Yeah.
That's much later. That's when Atherton finally comes to town. No, no. The Beachwoods have that false alarm where the daughter encounters one in the shower, and you get again. This movie's full of bait and switches. You get the part where the daughter's seeing one in the shower, and the father sits on a toilet that the spider just crawled into.
and she just straight up screams.
Right. Neither one of them ends up getting bitten at that time.
And of course, the audience sees the cobweb that's behind the shower and the spider that's crawling along the curtain pull or whatnot. And she screams bloody murder. Of course, she drops her towel, and father and son come running in. And
right. Yeah, it's and then of course Delbert gets called to the house, and you see him rooting around under the toilet, not finding the spider that's right there. But there he talks about someone falling into a nest of black widows and getting bitten dozens of times and not dying. But he's like, but they were never the same again. And that's true. Widow venom will mess you up. It won't kill you, but it'll mess you up. And so that was kind of an interesting thing that they included that, as far as I know, was accurate.
And what do you mean it'll mess you up?
Nerve damage.
There's a medical term for it called lactrodectism. The genus is Lactrodectus, and the 13-spot spider in the Mediterranean would cause muscle spasms and twitching, and the tarantella was developed because they were trying to get the venom out, but they blamed a wolf spider they called the tarantula. They didn't realize it was actually widow spiders. I spoke to a guy once, he was a tree remover, who said he got bitten by a black widow once, and he still has muscle spasms periodically. Not often, but every now and then he'll have a spasm, he'll seize up. And the red widow, supposedly, by reputation, does it permanently. It's the weakest of the widows in terms of its venom, but it supposedly is permanent. If you get bit by a red widow, you will have spasms periodically for the rest of your life. That's what that's what they do, is they affect your musculature and your nervous system. And yeah, if you got bit dozens of times, you probably would survive, but you probably would not enjoy it. You'd probably wish for death after a few years, if not sooner. Yeah.
It's the American dad joke. You'll live, but you will not live well.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, they're. I believe it's there. They're at Margaret's house, or are they at the doctor's house?
I think they went to Margaret's house to look for Dr. Atherton wanted a specimen captured. Yes, live specimen. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where we have the wonderful sheriff walking around and everything, and he's eating the cereal, and I still, like I said earlier, was hoping he'd stick his hand in there and get bit the first time I watched it. But no such luck. He just dumps the cereal and it's a
Well,
dead one.
Never 10
well, he
bruised
does find a dead one, yes, which freaks him out.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they do end up finding a live one, and you see just how scared Ross is of the spider, because he's telling him, you have to move closer so it moves
Yeah.
closer to me so I can get it, you know.
And he says something about there's a certain chemical that allows people to. He's like, I think I'm missing that. But there was this thing earlier where his wife told him to go up the ladder and look at the web, and she said it's therapy. And so we have this sort of running theme in the movie of him, of therapy, if you will.
Of him like exposure therapying to spiders.
Exactly. Yeah. And I believe at the end he actually does repeat that word of therapy. It's like,
Well, you can almost like hear him say therapy. Yeah, right, or some shit like that. in the end, when he's dealing with the big one and realizes he's in the nest.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying monster spider. Like, I mean, that probably would not be a bad way to like. I mean, if you can handle being near that thing, I think almost every other spider you'd see for the rest of your life would be kind of easy.
Right.
Because, I mean, even me not being scared of spiders, like, seeing that thing, it's like, jeez. It's like the size of a freaking football and shit.
It's like that's a final boss. Once we finish the final boss,
it's pulsating, and it looks like a pulsating tumor. You know.
the egg pack, yeah. But that's a lovely idea. But
There's something I saw on Discovery a really long time ago that was like, if spiders were, if spiders were the size of cats, that would be it for other organisms.
ooh, that's a thought. Well, they were a lot bigger than eight-legged freaks.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that in the Eight-Legged Freaks episode.
Which
I
is
wish I could remember what that special was, so I could like revisit it. There used to be a lot of cool, like, speculative stuff, kind of like that on TV.
It is one of the interesting things about this movie is that most of the spiders are big, but they're not like freakishly big. You know, it's like even Big Bob is only a little bigger than the biggest spiders. And I think IMDb said they put some prosthetics on a Goliath bird-eating spider to make him a little bigger. And that was about it. He wasn't huge, but he was like the world's largest spider. Just not huge.
Well,
it was something that could realistically exist, and I appreciated that.
Exactly, yes.
There is a lot that they can do with camera angles, too. So,
so where were we in the story? We're
at the spider investigation.
Yeah.
At Margaret's house.
And I think once they capture their spider, I think that's when he tells Atherton, yes, I think we have a problem here, and you need to get up here. It's like, yeah.
There's that moment where he's like, where our doctor is like paralyzed, and the grad student is like, he's like, is that it? It's like, I'd say it's a damn good suspect.
Yeah.
It's like hissing at them on the table. It's like, ooh, they don't usually do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely not your normal run-of-the-mill spider.
No, siree.
So I think it's after that, and then professor comes and everything, then they realize that they have a really big problem. And I think about that time is when you finally we get to the scene with the coroner and his wife, that they're gonna sit down with their popcorn and watch Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, they try to call them and they can't get through. And I think it's the sheriff who speaks up and says it's wheel time. And he's like, "The what?" And he's like, "Wheel of Fortune." They always take the phone off the hook for that.
I seem to remember Michael J. Fox being on one of the TV screens during one of the spider killings.
Well, earlier on, they were watching Family Ties on one of the. Yeah. No, that's a show I haven't seen in many years.
Me neither.
Yeah. But wasn't that when the daughter was staying over with the other friend? Or was that?
Oh, you mean scaring the bejesus out of each other?
Yeah. It could have been. I don't remember. But there you got some little bait and switch there where you thought one or both of the girls might be getting it, and they ended up leaving the room and leaving the spider behind.
Yeah, they ended up accidentally squishing it.
Yeah. Accidentally threw the book down on top of it, and then one of them steps on it. And we should mention Goodman actually, Delbert, when he went to the beach woods, he sees a spider as he's leaving, and he sprays the crap out of it with whatever he's got on his pack, and then steps on it. And then he heads. I think he heads over. I think he gets called over at that point to wherever they're researching the spiders, and he says, "Oh, it's probably still on the bottom of my shoe."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's not going to help. But,
well, even so, I mean, it would be a start for a specimen.
Yeah.
I do want to give him a little bit of credit there.
So yes, they find the coroner and his wife are now deceased because the spiders were in the popcorn bowl. And when is it the doc or is it the apprentice that's examining them, and the one comes out of the coroner's
No,
mouth?
it's the doc. It's the doc because he gets real close to the coroner, and out comes the spider from his mouth, and he's like,
That was crazy. That's so nasty.
Yeah.
I like watching. I like movie reactions on YouTube, and that part like slaughters people. It is so funny.
Oh, I'm just looking through the quotes here, and they're looking at the dead spider that the sheriff Lloyd took out of the box, and the coroner's like, "What could have killed it?" And Dr. Ross is like, "The shock of seeing Lloyd."
Yes.
It's good times.
And when he said that, though, I said it was sugar, and David's like, "How would that?" Is like as well, because that's not something that they digest. And he was in a box of cereal.
Well, and I'm not sure.
I feel like the writer probably did some research on like most distressing places you could see spiders, because a lot of those fake out setups are really just cruel with that.
Yeah. I think for a long time, actually, after I first saw this, I think I was paranoid about lamps with lampshades. Because I think it was the old lady, wasn't it, who was killed with the spider?
Margaret.
Yeah.
That's how it bit Margaret. It just fell out of the lampshade.
Yeah. Definitely. And then the one in the shower, I think that kind of stuck with me for a while too, if I remember correctly. Of course, I saw a couple other movies when I was a kid. There seemed to be a lot of movies with people getting attacked in shower. I think I saw a couple of those that made me a little nervous. But yeah.
The 90s was definitely a interesting time in horror because this was definitely one of the more comedic of the darker horror because there is a serious tone in this one.
Yeah. This is the scene that I was talking about before, where the sheriff introduces Delbert to the entomologist. He's like, "He's the professor. This is our town exterminator." And Delbert's like, "Delbert McClinton, infestation management. Always nice to meet a colleague." And then he's like, now he believes he came across one of the offending spiders a couple hours ago. The doctor's like, "Might you have brought it with you? Actually, he's probably still at the bottom of my shoe. You really can't tell what it is anymore."
I almost wonder if Frank Marshall, the director, had actually thought of the names of the sheriff and Delbert, taking it from The Shining, because you got Delbert Brady and Lloyd, the bartender.
Maybe.
Well, who actually wrote the screenplay with this? Was that the director?
Yeah, Frank Marshall is kind of a name, right?
Right. Okay, so Don Jacoby and Wesley Strick are credited with the screenplay. Jacoby and Al Williams with the story, but I'm sure Marshall might have. I know they made tweaks to the script, so maybe they did insert those as a direct homage, or maybe the original writers did. Hard to say. But I do know, I had not realized, I had totally forgotten this was an Amblin production and that Steven Spielberg was an exec producer. But apparently Spielberg and Marshall worked together on Always, which starred John Goodman, and that's how Goodman got the role. So I still need to see Always. I know that was one of Audrey Hepburn's last movies, but one day.
Yeah, I like that movie. It's a really good movie.
All right.
But so I guess we're up to now. The professor sees the pictures of the web.
Right. I think it's the others decided to go the coroners or the medical examiners, whatever. They were going to his place, and I guess the doctor was going with the cop, so they were coming along after. And that's when he sees the wife's picture. Yeah. He's like, "I need to go where this was taken."
And then Doctor realizes that the nest is at his house.
Yep.
Of all places.
Yep. And the others figure that out in a few minutes because they were like talking about, well, where had the attacks been taking place? They probably came from a central point, and they put them all on the map. And they're like, "Well, what? Well, who lives here? What does anyone know?" And Dr. Ross is like, "Yeah, I know. That's where I live."
And the professor is the first one who shows up at the place, and he's like, he goes into the place, and he's like, "Yep, this is where you are," and he's like, come out wherever you are, or dinner time or something like that."
And here there's also a bit of a Spielberg connection, and I felt when I watched that scene, I had the feeling of Robert Muldoon tracking the velociraptors and then see, clever girl, right before he gets killed. And I'm like, it can't be accidental that Spielberg was involved in both movies. You know.
Well, Frank Mrshall was the director of Congo,
Right.
which I believe Vinegar Syndrome is coming out with a new Blu-ray 4K
saw
release. So,
and Congo, like Jurassic Park, is based on a Michael Crichton novel. So it's interesting. Another connection there. But,
Yeah, they definitely watch that.
So, other than that, we do have the nest, the rest of the nest scene where he's kind of getting freaked out. Has a wine rack fall over on his butt. And,
well, they
he-
rush back. They rush back to the house to find their family calmly watching TV. But right then is when the spiders attack, and it's like, that's some timing, isn't it?
How the heck they train those spiders?
Make themselves known.
What's that?
It's more so they make themselves known because the spiders have been there the whole time, and they finally just start coming out of like the woodwork.
Right.
And it's like, I bet if they had paid more attention to their surroundings, like during the day, they would have. There are so many spiders in that building. They absolutely would have seen them if they'd been looking for them sooner.
Right.
Like,
Well, it's
it
like,
is great.
well, again, as I mentioned earlier, there are scientists will tell you that there are an enormous number of spiders in any given area. I think they mentioned it at one point in this movie that you will find an enormous number of spiders if you really look. And most people just don't notice most of them. They might notice 5% at most under most circumstances.
There are definitely a few around inside our building that I tend to like ignore because they're way high up.
Yeah.
But I know that they're there.
Well, our house has a thriving population of eastern parson spiders, and I see them every now and then. Not all the time, but I know they're around. There are other spiders in the house, but those seem to really like it in the house. And then that's not even saying how many are outside, but yeah. It's crazy sometimes to think about it. Which is one of the reasons why it's good not to be phobic, because otherwise you might not want to hear those things. But
Okay, well, I guess we're to the big showdown, which it is a big showdown between
pretty much
Doc and the spider. And
the Doc gets his family and Chris out of the building, and then he is trapped and ends up falling through the rotted floor into the wine cellar, which it's a good thing that floor was rotted, or it might have hurt more when he fell on it. Yeah.
I think we missed that whole little exchange, I think, too. It's like, bad wood.
Yeah.
How do we fix that? Get good.
Tear it out. Replace it with good wood.
It's so like straightforward. It's hard to remember. It's almost hard to remember because it's like, nah, he had to said more than that, right?
No, I saw that in the quotes, and I was very amused by that whole exchange. It was like, first of all, there was the oh geez, where's the quotes list? What was the first thing he said? He said, would anyone object if I tore this floor out? And Molly's like, I would. False alarm then, lead on. And then she's like, why is all the wood rotting? I'll tell you why. Bad wood. So what do? Tear out bad wood, put in good wood. It's like, yeah, Delbert is nothing if not direct and to the point. It's quite abused.
So yeah, it is quite a showdown though between the Doc and the Spider. I mean, that last bit of the movie when you're watching it, you can't turn away and you're like, oh,
Of course, I think it was Dave that mentioned that comedic moment where he's just grabbing at every bottle he can and throwing it, and he picks up, not the Chateau. And then he puts it down, picks up another bottle.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man, I loved that. It's like he's like desperately just throwing stuff at the spider, like trying to like keep it away from him. And he checks the bottle. He's like, no, not that one.
Right.
I
gets this really cool.
Probably do that too.
He creates this really fun weapon where what was it? It was like one of those click lighters, and I think it was a paint. Maybe it was an aerosol of some sort, and he
like
creates this
or something or
blowtorch. Yeah, that was kind of fun. I kept expecting him to turn one of the bottles into a Molotov cocktail, but he never does quite do that.
Yeah, what happens is even more ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, basically uses the nail gun to fire the spider, which is on fire, at the nest. Well, it worked. I gotta say, those nests were wild. That was I'd be a little wigged out to see a spider nest that big. Especially,
I'm not exactly sure I would want to sleep underneath one of those pulsating.
Oh no,
nutsack looking like. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I would say that the special effects team did a pretty awesome job there.
Oh yeah.
And then, of course, we have him. If I remember correctly, he does in fact throw the darn thing into a fire after a little bit of pitter pattering. I love that little pitter pattering that you hear on the pipes above. For some reason, the fact that you can hear it and whatnot, and he's like, and
crazy
just jumps out at him.
I don't know if we can even do it justice, describing it, because the movie, the movie is very goofy and very funny in a lot of ways. But like we've said before, like you guys have said, it does take itself pretty seriously. And in this scene, it's just kind of like almost all bets are off on that now.
Right.
The spider has villain music and everything. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it didn't sink its teeth in his leg before it got to the seesaw thing,
There were multiple times in the movie where I felt like they toyed a little bit with the internal logic, because there were times, the way the spiders were acting, there were times where I felt like that spider would have already attacked by now. You know what I mean? And certainly in that last confrontation, there were a couple times I was like, why did that spider bite him already?
Although the close of those bulbous looking eyeballs of the spider was pretty good.
That was kind of cool how they would zoom in on that.
The spider eyes POV thing. That was the spider eye cam was insane.
Showing the fire reflecting in its eyes, and I was like, that was kind of cool.
There's a I used to listen to this podcast called God Awful Movies, and for Patreon bonuses they would do like normal movies, and I think they actually did Arachnophobia on one episode, and they were like dying laughing over that close up.
Good deal.
I want to see I wonder if I still have that somewhere. I hope I do.
Okay, so I guess we're to the end because he does Doc does ultimately win in the showdown, and they had evidently had found out earlier that the what do you want to call the new spiders?
The one they called the general is the one he was like battling with.
Well,
and I talk about like the egg sac, like and how he shoots it right into the egg sac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they realized that the new spiders don't have a very long shelf life.
Yes, they did say they don't live very long. Yeah. So
that is another interesting biology thing too, like basically like an ant colony, but spiders.
Yeah.
Like social arachnids. Like I kind of wonder if that's something that I don't think that's something that we do see in reality, but that's a real interesting concept, I think.
I think the term, from what I saw, I think the term for it is eusocial. And you see it in a lot of ants, bees, wasps, not all, but a lot of them. But it's very rare in other groups of arthropods. And I don't think that any arachnids are known to have that behavior. So it's different.
At work, there was a certain area at work that there was like 3 different spiders living there, and they each had their own web.
Right. Spiders can live in close proximity to one another, but they're almost always solitary. Like even the ones that are communal don't have a social hierarchy. They just share space. But spiders are also very cannibalistic and
territorial.
So they can live in close space, but it depends on the spider and it depends on their territory. Like if you're talking something like a huntsman spider or a wolf spider that hunts and roams, they're going to have a bigger territory than an orb weaver that hardly ever leaves its nest. So they're going to be, it depends on the spider how much they're going to share their space. And, but sharing space and having.
You caught a bug that was supposed to be in my web.
What's that?
I was talking as if I was like a spider that was in the same territory of another spider. And hey, you got a bug that was supposed to be in my web.
And of course, widow spiders get their name for a reason. Cannibalizing your mate is common in spiders. Like it's well known in widows, but a lot of spiders do that. So even mating can be a very, very, very dicey encounter. And it's generally the male hoofs it out of there as quickly as possible.
That was, they said something about that in Eight-Legged Freaks, that the female was bigger than the male, and I remember the guy telling the kid, after they mate, that's it. She kills him.
Right. Yep. Not always, but again, it depends on how fast the males are, and and sometimes it can be just a quirk of the moment. Like there are spiders where if the male does something to piss the female off, he'll die. It just depends. But
It
yeah.
seems like I don't know if it's just in the movies, but is it actually for real that a lot of times the female spider is bigger than the male spider?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Again, widows are a good example. The males are very slender and very long-legged, and they actually look like bunches of fluff and are really easy to overlook. And the females have that big, fat butt, and they're built very, very differently. And there's
That
also a
happens in a
color.
lot of animals actually too.
Yeah, it's very common in spiders. It's not 100%, but it's common.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep, the females are very dominant in the species.
right.
It's making me think of anglerfish, where like the male is basically just like a leech that lives on the female, and she is
Right.
like the actual animal.
Right. Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody have anything else to say before we get into like production now?
Well, we also had the final scene where they hightailed it back home to San Francisco, and he finally opens the wine, and then they have an earthquake, and the credits start rolling as the wine is dripping onto the carpet, and I'm like, after all that, he still ends up wasting most of the bottle.
Yeah.
Well, and he's like, I think we better check on the kids.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. It's if it's not one thing, it's another. But at least it was what they were used to, right?
Okay. So, well, let's get into production. What everybody think about the production?
It was pretty solid.
It's pretty great. Like everything looks, all the spiders look pretty realistic.
Mhm.
Like even their fake, crushable spiders. Like I buy all of it.
I
Right.
thought it looked really realistic too, and then when I found out that they imported 300 of some damn spiders for this movie,
Yeah,
it's like no wonder it looked realistic.
right. Yeah.
Unlike eight-legged freaks, because those just grew astronomically large, but a lot of them in there. These definitely looked more realistic because, well, they were, but they even if they would have been using more props, these spiders did not look like. Well, yeah, right. The spider's really that big, you know.
And most of the effects they did use were practical, animatronics and that kind of stuff. Like they didn't really do too much that would look all that fake. And they did they cut certain corners, but it was effective. Like the scene where they tested out the venom on a mouse, they didn't show the mouse dying, but we still got the message. We didn't need to see it. So they were able to cut corners on the cost there.
Right.
And of course, even the cast, of course, now we know Jeff Daniels, we know John Goodman. They're really big names at least to movie fans. At the time, they were not that big in names. They were both still character actors. Goodman was best known for Roseanne. So they were able to save some cost with their cast and still get a really great cast. So that was pretty good. And I guess having Spielberg behind the scenes helped with a lot of that too, and Frank Mrshall, that helped a lot. But yeah, I think overall, I thought it was pretty solid production.
What do you think, David?
I thought that the movie was very believable. I thought that the creatures. I mean, I've seen like older spider movies like Tarantula's Deadly Cargo and Kingdom of the Spiders. I mean, I don't think that they had as much of a problem with the importation of the spiders, returning them in that retrospective of a budget. But I mean, I think this was the next level of spider movie at the time that this came out. Like until this movie had come out, we had Tarantula and other various atomic
Well, they did
monsters.
do spiders in Something Wicked This Way Comes.
I was going to say, we talked recently about a movie with a spider scene, but that was like a spider scene. This one, they were featured, like heavily featured.
And the original scene of that was a hell of a lot more scarier, from what I understand. So,
right.
Too bad there wasn't someone saying, Disney, just stick to the original plan.
I don't really, David, you're usually better on this part about the music.
Yeah.
Let's see.
We had good music.
Did anybody realize that over the credits we got a spider POV song?
Oh, yeah, it's called Don't Bug Me, and it's by Jimmy Buffett. And I did not fully catch that. Like, it sounded familiar, but then when I saw the actual credits, I'm like, holy crap, that was Buffett? But I love that they got an original Jimmy Buffett song for this movie. I love that.
Yeah, I was listening to the lyrics to
I have never heard Jimmy Buffett sing when I knew it was Jimmy Buffett. Wow.
They also had a couple other songs in the cast.
Yeah, Summer Wind, which was performed by Frank Sinatra, Spirit Your Heart by Russell Hitchcock, Blue Eyes Are Sensitive to the Light by Sarah Hickman, Going Ahead by Pat Metheny, I Left My Heart in San Francisco by Tony Bennett, and of course, Don't Bug Me.
Which, of course, they played off Martin in San Francisco when they went back home, which was, a little on the nose, but it made sense.
I do feel a little bad that they went back because it's like, that town does need a doctor, and you would kind of be a hero after that. Like everybody would want to
most of the main town folk died. So.
Well, quite a few did. Dustin, I don't know if you were here.
Did the sheriff die?
Yes. I don't know if you were here when I said that. IMDb says that they have said in interviews, and I don't know if there's like a deleted scene on one of the releases. I don't know. But apparently they had a scene planned, if not filmed, where he drove away to find the others. And a spider was in his car and it bit him and he crashed while driving. But they didn't actually film it or it wasn't in the movie or whatever.
This feels like a movie that would have a novelization. Was it in there?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Was there a novelization?
I believe there was.
I don't. You're right. It seems like it would be,
but it was one of those that was done after the movie, I think.
Okay. So the soundtrack, the score, is by Trevor Jones.
Yep, and he's the composer of Cliffhanger, The Last of the Mohicans.
He did From Hell.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remembered him from Hell because that was one of the first soundtracks I ever picked up.
13 Days. He did Notting Hill. He's done some interesting stuff. Dark City.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Right. G.I. Jane.
Dinotopia, the miniseries.
What's that?
Dinotopia, the miniseries.
Right. And In the Name of the Father. And personally, I liked it. I didn't think it was anything like Mississippi Burning. It wasn't necessarily. Oh, he did the music for Labyrinth. Okay, that's a notable one. It wasn't anything like extraordinarily I would write home about for the most part, but I did like how he used some indigenous instruments in a couple of the parts. That was kind of cool. He also did the music for Dark Crystal.
Angel Heart.
Yeah. I need to see Angel Heart. I've heard good things.
It's pretty good. It can be a little confusing if you get lost in what's happening. It may be a little hard to. You might have to stop and like go back a little.
Good.
It's awesome though. Like it has a twist that a lot of people say they can see coming, and you can see it coming. But if you're not paying like mega close attention, it will blow your face off.
Right. Huh.
Excalibur, he was the composer of?
You know, I did not enjoy Excalibur. I need to see it again, find out why people like it so much, but I was not blown away.
Well, I mean, it's Trevor Jones, though. I mean, he's done so much cool stuff. Like,
Right.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to get up to favorite scenes, favorite characters.
Okay.
So, Jake, why don't you go first?
Well, I've already mentioned my favorite scene. No, we're Baptists. That was so hilarious. And most of the scenes with Delbert were pretty good. Like the scene where he's looking at the basement and talking about the rotting wood and whatever. That was pretty good. And well, yeah, Delbert's got to be my favorite character. I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward.
Okay. How about you, Dustin?
I think my favorite scene would probably be, our final showdown, because it's just so over the top. And it sticks out in my mind, I think, the most. Well, next to John Goodman's bizarre personality.
Okay. How about you, David?
As far as favorite character, I would have to say Julian Sands' character is one of my favorites.
Okay.
It's who I will remember in this movie, and I would have to say the popcorn scene, the shower scene with a daughter. I just think it was a little hilarious that she dropped her towel in front of Dad and brother.
Yeah.
And probably Julian Sands' character, Professor, what was it, Aberton, when he died. That scene when he just, he's like, dinner's here. I guess there's a lot of like moments, like little moments, that just kind of stay with you,
I also want to mention the scene in the coroner's office where the teaching assistant or whatever his case may be is having so much trouble holding his lunch, and the coroner just comes wandering through, eating and just having a good old time. that was pretty hilarious too.
Yeah.
What?
Well, for me, I really do like John Goodman's character. He's definitely my favorite. But my favorite scene is, I gotta go along with Dustin, because that whole showdown at the end was just so awesome. So it really was. I mean, because that spider just kept on coming. He just kept on coming.
Well, and the fact that he was able to seesaw it right off of his chest, and it hadn't even bitten him or anything. That was just.
Oh yeah, that when he hit that thing and the thing when it went flying like that, that was just great. And then it had to come back out.
Well, yeah, it came back like Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Like the Halloween 2 Michael Myers in the flames.
Right.
I could see someone fan editing that theme right in there.
So yeah, that
Somebody
down
fan edited Michael Myers onto Darth Vader from Rogue One. I saw that recently. That was something.
Okay.
So I guess we're to the point of outros.
Yes. So at the end of everything, hopefully you ladies and gentlemen have enjoyed our discussion on this particular film. Like, share, and subscribe. Let us know down in the comments what you thought of the movie, what you thought of the discussion, and we'll definitely have something interesting and crazy for you next week, as we'll be going into my choice, which I will bring up after we go around to the outro, the rest of the outros. So, Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I run the Crypto Horrors YouTube channel where I used to show off all the cool horror movie stuff I could find around Milwaukee. Not a lot of that going on, so not a lot of uploads the last year or so. I keep thinking I'm gonna be able to come back, and then something crazy gets in the way and stops me. But the channel is not dead, I promise, and I am going to be doing stuff for it again as soon as possible. So go subscribe to the Crypto Horrors on YouTube and follow me on Twitter, where I am Cryptaxis, and I talk way too much about stuff. I'm also on Blue Sky now as Cryptaxis, so go follow all those, and also the Instagram Crypto Horrors of the same name. So yeah, make me feel bad about not doing stuff so that I do stuff. And with that, I'm going to head out because I have a ridiculous day to get ready for tomorrow.
All right.
Okay. Well, you have a good night.
Thank you for
Thanks
coming
for
on.
coming.
No problem. Subscribe.
All right.
Alrighty. How about you, Tammy? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I basically go on this channel and another one with David and talk with everybody about their feelings about movies and check out ones a lot of times that I've never seen. And I've got my own collection, which the one tonight, it was in it. And that's about it right now because it's winter time. So.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm Kotobuki Jake. I'm the co-host of the YouTube channel Septum Sin vs. World, where we are a little infrequent in our updates, but there have been a few going up. And I know right now the tabletop horror series is going up a little bit at a time, where we talk about movies with a D&D connection. We also do pickups and various other related projects. I also keep quite busy most of the time with various projects. Sometimes wish there were 3 of me, if not more, so I could do all the stuff I want to do, including geeking out about nature and going out and hiking and that kind of stuff, but also, read, write, and view various things. And I always try to watch our movies each week to join these folks for our weekly discussions. It's always interesting to see what comes down the pike. And again, this is one I have not seen in many a year, so it was nice to get a chance to revisit it, and especially again over the weekend. We have our local art second run theater, a historic theater. We have an historic landmark theater, the Bird, that has largely gone to a model of showing classic films. But every year they do a big event they call the Big Lebowski, where they show the Big Lebowski. They did a bar crawl, which unfortunately I was not able to participate in. But we have a local brewing company called Center of the Universe that has a beer called the El Duderino, and we got one of those with our ticket. There was a costume contest, trivia contest. It was a fun little event, and I got to do that, and again with us covering 10 Cloverfield Lane a couple weeks ago, I'm getting a bunch of John Goodman roles knocked out. It's kind of cool. And next weekend they're going to do another event that I'm hoping to go to, where Greg Sestero will be there to introduce The Room and the new film from his bud Tommy Wiseau, Big Shark. I've never seen either movie. I know that The Room is infamously terrible. And so I'm kind of curious, and I look forward to possibly meeting Mr. Sestero and maybe asking him what the hell he was thinking. But it'll be interesting.
Is Tommy Wiseau is actually supposed to be there?
No, Sestero is supposed to be there. I don't think
Okay.
Wiseau is supposed to be.
Oh, the other guy.
Yeah. His star of his films. I did see The Disaster Artist, and I think I saw it at that theater, actually. So
And that was supposedly based on the memoirs of the actor, if I remember correctly.
Well, they recreated scenes from the movie, and it was interesting. I enjoyed it, but at any rate, yeah. So I got stuff going on. And I'll leave it at that for the time being.
Alrighty. My name is David Sturgey. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this fantabulous journey that we've been having. So we just got through another creepy spider movie. So hopefully you're ready for it. If you have not seen it, those of you in the new generation of E might definitely get a kick out of it. It's not black and white, so you don't have to not hate it or whatever. So, but next week we are going to be covering a movie, I believe, also from the 90s. I believe. It's called Bloodsucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh, and it is a very weird film. Very weird.
I wouldn't guess.
So I'm curious as to what you guys might think of it. It's so strange. I like it in certain aspects. So it's kind of interesting. But